Hi everyone, Kendall here, and welcome back to my channel. Also, if you're new here, welcome. This will be the first in a series of 9 videos for a sew along hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com, called Autumn Wonders. Now, here in Australia, we're just starting spring, and our autumn is a long way off, but as 98% of you are in the US and it is autumn for you, this sew along comes at just the right time. So, week 1 of our Autumn Wonders sew along is all about pulling out your cozy things. Are you a person that changes your wardrobe to match the season? I wear shorts and t shirts all year round, so I wouldn't know anything about that. Anyway, if you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how I do it. As always, I start with all of my pieces cut out, and in this instance, my grey fabric is my medium, the light is the light, the red is the dark fabric, and I've got the background squares there. The dark and the background squares are to make our half square triangles, so we're going to begin there. To make the half square triangles, you take your 2 background squares and you draw a line from corner to corner on each of those. You then match those up right sides together with your dark squares, take them to the machine and stitch 1/4 of an inch on each side of the drawn line. With the stitching now done, I like to take those to the pressing mat and just give them a quick press first to set those seams and settle those stitches into the fabric before taking them to the cutting mat and cutting them in half along our drawn line. If you are using a heater raised pen, I would recommend against pressing before you slice them in half, as you will lose your line. If you do lose the line though, it doesn't really matter, just slice them in half on the diagonal and Bob's your uncle. After we've sliced them in half, we'll take them back to the pressing mat and press towards the darker of the 2 fabrics. After we've done this, we need to trim them down to the required size, so refer back to your pattern. As you may or may not know, I prefer to trim my half square triangles 2 at a time, and I do that by nesting the seam really nice and snug, making sure that I've got a really tight nest in between the 2. I then take my 6.5-inch square ruler and I use the diagonal on that ruler to place on the stitching line. I then make sure that I have enough fabric outside the required trim down measurement, and I trim the first 2 sides. When you are checking to make sure that you have enough fabric around, you need to make sure that you've got enough on the outside that you're trimming and on the inside that your measurement is covered on the rest of the triangle. Then you simply spin that around, and now you can place your required trim down measurement on those 2 freshly cut sides and trim the final 2 sides. With those half square triangles now done, we'll move on to the little 4 patch that makes the center of the block. For this, we need to grab the smaller squares from both our medium and light fabric and place them in the orientation as directed in the pattern. We'll start by doing the 2 vertical seams. We'll press both of those towards the darker of the 2 fabric, and then we'll sew the horizontal seam. Because we pressed to the darker of the 2 fabrics after doing our vertical seam, you would have noticed that that little one in the middle, when we make our little checkerboard, nested nicely. I'm doing an unnecessary step here and swirling the seams in the center, and I have shown in previous videos how to do that, but if you'd like me to show you again, just let me know in the comments below. With that little 4 patch for the center now made, we just need to make our strip sets that go in the middle of the top and the bottom and on each end of our middle row. To do this, we'll grab our remaining light and medium strips, and I've got a directional fabric and I've cut it a specific way, so I have to be really careful with which ones I sew together. But for you playing along at home, if you don't have a directional fabric, just sew each of these strips with 1 seam, and we'll press towards the darker of the 2 fabrics on each of these as well. With all of the components now made that we need for this block, we just need to lay it out as per the pattern. So you can see in the inset there in the top left hand corner of how this goes. So once we've got all of those pieces laid out as per the pattern, we just need to apply our 9 patch construction rules. For a 9 patch, we start by doing our vertical seams and then our horizontal seams. You would have seen throughout that footage that I did clip one of the seams to move it in the opposite direction so that I could get a nice nest and we'd have all of our pieces lining up as we like them. So before we move on to creating our last vertical seams, we'll just give this a quick finger press. So for the center row, we'll press out towards our strip sets, and on the top row, we'll also press in towards our strip set. Give those a finger press and we can continue with our other vertical seams. With all of our vertical seams now done, we just need to press each of those into place, and you would have noticed again that I had to clip that little seam in the center of the 4 patch so that we could get our intersections to line up nice and snugly. If I hadn't have swirled the seams on the center of that 4 patch, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have had to have clipped those seams, but I did, and that's fine. So when you clip the seams, you clip into but not past the stitching. You move the seam allowance into the direction that you want, and then you just continue as normal. Now, because if you followed my pressing steps at each step along the way here, we will now have every single intersection here nest to do our horizontal seams. Once we've sewn this first horizontal seam, we'll press that in towards the center of the block before attaching the other row and repeating the process, and once again pressing in towards the center. And there we have it, folks. Our block for this week is done. Well, that's it for another week, folks. And as always, I really love if you could like, share, subscribe. And if you subscribe, well, if you don't, I don't know why. But when you do subscribe, not if, make sure you click that little bell and you'll be notified of all my upcoming videos. I generally am only on a Wednesday, but sometimes I have another free pattern for you. Or I may even conduct my own sew-alongs, as I recently did with Bunnies and Blooms. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.